thank some of our awesome sponsors. So obviously, we're here at Old Mutual, and yeah, I'd like to thank Next 176. We've done a few events with them so far, and they've been awesome in assisting us with venues, and yeah, just been a really great sponsor for us. The next is Cloud on Demand, hosting the one breakout room. Yeah, they've really enabled us in many ways to make sure that the event can be free. And then lastly, Specno. Specno started this event as the Founders Den, really aimed at helping founders build ecosystems around them for support structures. I mean, building a startup can be quite lonely. And yeah, today we focused on innovators because we live in a world where we have the tools at our fingertips to all be innovators, no matter where we work or what we do. Anything else? Cool. So then, I'd like to welcome up our panelists. So this evening, we are going to be hearing from Simba. Please welcome, please come up onto your seat. I'm going to let each panelist. Hello? Okay, there we go. I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves. And next up, we've got Harry Lee from Elio AI. We've got Priyash from the Awareness Company. And then lastly, we've got our host of the panel, Daniel, one of the co-founders at Specno. Cool. Well, over to you, Daniel. I hope everybody has a great evening and look forward to seeing you around.
Cool, thanks, Mr. Harvey. Yeah, again, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time out on, I'm sure, your busy Thursday to come give us your time, your attention, your focus. Not gonna lie, whenever I see a big crowd of people, the heart still thumps a lot, the nerves kick in. And this was a particularly, I want to say, difficult one for me to prepare for because, you go on LinkedIn these days and you're absolutely flooded with the AI hype. But I don't think that this crowd would be here today if people weren't actually taking AI seriously and wanting to go a little bit deeper than the hype. And so I've spent quite a lot of time almost, prepping the panelists, having our own one-on-one conversations and group conversations, because we're really going to try tonight to figure out how to keep it practical and engaging with also not going too deep, because I think we're all relatively nerdy on this panel. And so, yeah, we really want to cut through the fluff and help teams uncover what is hype, but then also, what is already being dismissed as a fad, when in actual fact, the core technology is going to change the world. It's going to change the way that we build product. It's going to change the way we service customers. It's going to change the way that we operate as ourselves in our professional lives, in our personal lives, as employees, as managers, as business owners, as people of the community. And so I'm really hoping that the conversation tonight teaches you all where to be learning, investing your time, what questions you should be asking yourselves, how seriously to take this whole AI thing, the movement, the next 5 years, etc. We will keep it quite, let's call it loose, fun, engaging, and then figure out how much to keep it a fireside chat between the four of us versus how much to just flip it to the crowd. So without further ado, I ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves, how they're involved with AI, why they're excited about it, and then from there we'll bust out a few more questions. Priyash, you want to start?
Happy. Daniel, thanks for having me. So yeah, super happy to be here. My name is Priyash. I'm the co-founder of the Awareness Company. So we're a local AI startup focusing on property and infrastructure sectors, primarily in South Africa, but looking to expand outwards. And I'm very excited about AI because it's flipped our entire narrative completely on its head. We've, at the beginning of this year, raised venture capital, and that strategy is completely changed. I raised based on something that has completely changed the world and our strategy. And so we use AI in 3 different ways. We build bespoke predictive ML models that we use within our product itself. We leverage the foundational models that's out there in the world. But we're also interestingly using AI for things like hiring, for things like marketing, and it's really changing the the status quo nowadays. So quite excited to be here and share some insights from our side.
Sweet. Harry?
Hi everyone, my name is Harry. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Media AI. AI is in our name, so yeah, that's why that's how I'm involved with AI. So we're an AI consultancy. We established, like my co-founder like to say, 4 BC. So that's 4 years before ChatGPT. Yes. So we basically help organizations design, build, and deploy AI solutions. We mostly focus on MLOps, which is setting up the foundational infrastructure for financial services, health tech, etc., and help them put AI solutions on top of it. Yeah, but seriously, I'm involved in AI since I had an opportunity to work on it as my final year project when I was studying electrical engineering, and then yeah, since then I've just been fascinated with AI. And the reason why we started Media AI was because my co-founder Meralda, who's the CEO, and I, we started chatting, and then we realized there's this massive gap where data scientists were having trouble productionizing their machine learning models. And then I was like, but it's mostly solved in the software engineering world through DevOps practices, etc. So then we started chatting, we found this gap in the market. So yeah, so we've been spending the last 6 years doing that.
Woo woo! Awesome. Evening, everybody. Thank you as well to Speaking for the invite. My name is Simba. Yes, Lion King, Simba Chips, all of that. I'll chat for you for an original joke when we have drinks afterwards. So I work at Infinity, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Vodacom. We can chat a little bit more about what that includes. In the AI space, I look after the AI use cases in the organization. And really, I think the fundamental thing for me that I think artificial intelligence has helped with is translating this technology into real tangible value. We look at doing that across 3 different spaces. The one is specifically business optimization, which how do we translate it into rands and zeros if possible? The second becomes customer experiences. How do we make your lives as Vodacom telco customers simpler? And then thirdly, how do we make sure that the people that are serving you have an easier time to serve you as you use our products? Yeah.
Epic. I realized that I also did skim over my own intro a little bit, so maybe I should do that. But yeah, I'm Daniel Novitskas, one of the co-founders and chairman of Specno. And so to just give you a little bit of the throwback into how we started, I like to tell everybody that I've taken a trip to Silicon Valley, which to me felt like home of the startup, innovation, hyperscaling companies, and just surrounded by people that really felt like there was no excuses for why they shouldn't be able to change the world. And I wanted to come back to Africa and figure out, why we didn't have that energy or that atmosphere. We've got such determined people, people that want to change their lives, really intelligent people. And so the hypothesis was, how do we democratize access to technology? How do we bring that Silicon Valley flavor and energy to originally Cape Town and then South Africa and then the broader Africa? At the time of starting, I really wanted to create an AI CTO, which would be like a product consultant in every startup's pocket, helping them understand what their business goals are, how to better service customers, and how to implement the right technology in order to achieve those business goals. But I didn't know how to build startups, and I didn't know how to build AI. So we decided to launch a venture builder. Our first venture hit $1 million ARR within the first 12 months. Our second one did $1 million ARR within 6 months. And then within the first 5 years, we had launched 200 ventures, both in South Africa and across the board. And the end of our 5-year also marked the release of ChatGPT, or at least the public one when everybody started speaking about it. And finally, it felt like we had this technology where we could make every one of our venture consultants better. We could lower our price towards servicing our customers. But I myself could also begin to build solutions that it does enable everybody to become a developer and to build their own technology and to service their customers better through technology. And so over the last 2 years, I've personally immersed myself in this technology, and it is easy to see why, you go on LinkedIn and it's the same regurgitated stuff, and it's easy to dismiss it as a hype. But I almost relate it back to the internet in 1995, where there were these people that were out there saying that this thing's going to change the world, and one day the majority of your job is going to be done by looking at a screen and like talking to people online, and there's going to be businesses where you input your credit card data and some stranger is going to bill you, and people looked at you like you were crazy. And then the internet proliferated every area of humanity in our lives, and it's still continuing to do that. And it feels like we've kind of invented the steam engine now, and people are already saying why the steam engine won't work, but we haven't developed the applications that are going to turn the steam engine into something useful. Whereas the gents on this panel, they've been doing this again before GPT. I like to say before it was sexy. And so that kind of leads me into my next question. I think a lot of the people in this room are here today because they know that this technology is still in its infancy. It is still coming. It is going to change the world. Will we watch others pioneer and show us how it's done, and we will be the late adopters? Or do we have what it takes to become the pioneers? And so my question to you, gents, is let's just break it down. There's so many concepts in AI already. You were mentioning like some machine learning. Now we've got agents. For the people in this room that are wondering, as a business leader, particularly those that might not be technical, what is the bare minimum that the business leader today should at least know about the upper level concepts of AI?
Yeah, awesome one, Daniel. I'll jump in here. I mean, on a high level, right? AI for me is making us as humans smarter. That's like step one. Like leverage it to make yourself smarter. And I'll give you an example. So BC, I love that, Eric. That was awesome. I mean, 10 years ago, I was working in defense and military, and we were doing a range of really interesting projects like border control and anti-wildlife poaching. And back then we were creating machine learning and AI models to try to predict where poachers are going to be. And it took months to develop these things. Now it's you don't need to be a mathematician whiz, you can leverage it. So the foundations of what it is now is, okay, it's going to make you smarter, it's going to make you faster. Now you aggregate that into your teams, and then you level that up. And so don't think of it as it's a revolution, but it's an enhancement of us as humans. For me, that's the baseline. Start there, and then build it up, and bring it back into your own world. Then, whether you're a startup or whether you're a ginormous corporate, that for me is the foundation.
Epic.
Look, so I think for the non-technical business leader, because sometimes we need to make these things practical, every business has a few things that it does. It creates value and it captures value. And then underlying all of that is the processes that allow you to service your customer, whatever that may be, business, individual customer, all of that. I think what becomes critical, and this is really my fundamental thesis point to any business leader, entrepreneur, is how is it that you've been doing things, what did we say, BC, pre-ChatGPT and all the AI hype, and then ask yourself, okay, how can I innovate across the way that I service my customer or even create the value, leveraging technology to unlock that? And I think that's where some of the efficiencies and the opportunities to provide a differentiated service into the market exist for you all in the room. That really becomes my underlying thing for you to consider is artificial intelligence, to his point, allows you to do more, sometimes with less, but also better and faster.
So I think prerequisites for business leaders to maybe move into this space is just have the mentality of willingness to adopt. Because I think a lot of people have this fear because they don't understand it. I think everyone here knows about ChatGPT. I mean, if you've played around with it, you have that. Just try to bring it into your business. And I think, seeing it as an enabler is definitely, the utmost first step. It's just like, hey, don't fear it, just try it out, But of course, aim for low risk type of things. Don't just try and let it run your core business.
Yeah, fair. And for me, at least, one of the things that is different about this technology, I'll be honest, I am relatively young, so it's not like I was there for the hype of the dot-com bubble, so maybe I can't speak too specifically about the dot-com bubble. But what seems to be different is how quickly this technology is proliferating, right? I mean, ChatGPT going from 0 to 100 million users in record-breaking time. It's like everybody that was scared of the Skynet and Terminator all of a sudden realized it can help them write better emails and posts, and suddenly everybody's willing to be like AI's best friend. And already, we're seeing these crazy AI wars. We've got Zuckerberg saying, you know what, an AI researcher today is more valuable than an NBA player, so I'm going to offer you like $100 million package to come and do research. And Zuckerberg's got like 3 billion people that are subscribed to his empire. So the reach of this technology is absolutely crazy, but it does still feel, and this might be a point I make a lot, it still feels like people are going to find quick reasons to dismiss it. Oh, well, it hallucinates, it can't think for itself, it's just regurgitating. But again, because I've spoken to the panel in sort of a private capacity, and we're all relatively nerdy on this topic, I think we know that this technology is going a little bit deeper than what meets the eye, and we're definitely seeing emergent properties of intelligence and capability. And so, Harry, maybe I'll ask this more directly to you, but what is your feeling when it comes to agentic workflows and AIs being capable of not only thinking for themselves, but actually doing tasks, hiring other humans to do tasks, other AIs to do tasks? Where are we today with it? What's the state of it? How quickly is it coming? How seriously do people in the room need to take it?
So it's definitely coming a lot quicker than we thought. I mean, if you just think about the past 2 years, like ChatGPT, it's a storm. Like everyone's like heard of it, and the rate at like how it evolves is just like so hectic compared to like whatever we see on like cloud adoption, that sort of thing. But everyone has played around with ChatGPT, not everyone's in the cloud yet. So I think agentic workflow will definitely come a lot quicker. We do see it already in the wild, and a lot of websites are already considering changing the way that they're presenting information so that agents or LLMs can actually come and scrape it rather than for humans, right? And I don't know how many of you have tried to Google something, but these days when I Google something, I just look at the first results, right? And that is all scraped by Gemini, right? So that's an agent, right? In terms of workflows, it's more deterministic a lot of the times, but agentic workflows is deterministic, plus you give the agent some sort of freedom to do whatever he thinks is right. So we do see a lot of people wanting to do that. A lot of our clients also wanting to build it. A lot of them wanted to use it as a customer support agent, all that stuff. Like how do you actually do document processing? Like if it's an Excel file, choose a different type of processing. Let the agent decide like what is the best tool it can use. So yeah, so it's definitely coming. Yeah.
Sweet. Anyone else want to take a swing at that? I do have a different way of asking the question.
So before we get to like workflows and agentic flows and all of that, like from a business perspective, like what's the state of your data? Because now we want to leverage this powerful technology, in the business sense, which means you can't just go ask ChatGPT, what's going on. You got to plug in your data and you got to do all this ML ops and like all of that stuff. And so what I'm seeing when I talk to like business leaders, and it's like, oh yeah, I want this full automation agent like running there, but your data is like in 10-year-old databases, and the AIs can't even talk to it. So again, I think it is coming, but from a business perspective, whether you're a medium-sized organization or a large organization, if you aren't actually having a strategy for your data and the engineering and the pipelines and all of these like really boring things that you kind of need to do, you're not going to skip ahead to this agentic workflows. That's like my very strong opinion on that, because I'm seeing the state of data. I mean, what is OpenAI's differentiator? What have they been doing for 7 years? They've been collecting really good data, and they train their models on amazing data. I still don't really know what all the sources are, But that's the differentiator. So now if you want to differentiate in the business sense and get to the agentic way for workflows, sort that out first.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So look, I was going to ask the question now, at what point do you give your AI agent your credit card and let it go off and make decisions? But we're going to speak about digital clones in a bit, and we'll come back there. I think, for now, a lot of people in this room, they're also curious, like, let's be real. A lot of people are wasting a lot of money on technology implementation as it is, right? And I think why businesses are maybe a little bit more skeptical is this technology only feels scarier than just building some PWA front end. And so how do I make sure that what I'm building, the team that's building, is actually building something of substance, is going to build something that returns the value that I'm paying to this team to develop, etc. And so I guess my next question is, of the teams that have already proven that AI is going to give them productivity gains, they're seeing their ability to release code faster, they're seeing their ability to achieve more with these systems, what are some of the things that companies are focusing on in order to qualify almost them being this AI native development company? What is the state of being a leading product development team? Maybe give us some practical examples of how AI is implemented in these product teams.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'll give you a short example of like our own team.
Cool.
Like, we wanted to, push out the feature a month. And I'm like, I tell Shazia, my CTO, like, can we do a feature a day? Like, and she looks at me like, are you crazy? But I think we're heading in that direction where it can actually accelerate, because you still have to do the basics. Like, what's your product roadmap and what's your strategy and what are you targeting? So just because there's AI there doesn't mean you can do every single thing. But I think now it's changing the speed at which you can start to output things from the internal product team. And that's what's getting us like crazy excited. Because I mean, what is AI helping us with from a product team side? That thing you have in your mind, you always have this thing in your mind that it's really hard to put on paper and it's really hard to communicate. But now you start using the AI, you have this conversation with this thing, and now you can communicate better to your product teams. And now it's starting to get amazing. Like the speed of clarity is getting faster, and more clarity means more speed, and more speed means the product gets better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll take a bit of a non-conventional approach, because I think some of these conversations can be a conversation about technology, and what I've found in our implementations is actually a conversation about people and people with knowledge. Because I can come up with the best 10 use cases by looking at ChatGPT and get a list, but I actually need to have a conversation with the person in the organization, in the structure, and say, hey, what are your problems? And then you tell me your problems. I'm saying, okay, so but why does it work the way that it does? And you explain, okay, we do this, this, that, and the third, and then now we can go to the tech stack and say, okay, this is how we can actually apply this, that, to be able to get a better outcome. So underlying that, I think, is just strategically, first of all, what are you trying to solve for? And what does success look like, right? Let's start there. If you could do what you wanted to do, what would you be doing? That's part one. Then part two, we can come back and say, okay, does it actually make financial sense for the investment that you would have to make to get this specific outcome? Does it make financial sense in the long term for you to get the value that you're looking for? But I think the key thing there, as you'll see in the example I'm giving you, is what's the problem? What's the solution? What does success look like? And then we can start to work back that process in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely brilliant answer. One of my follow-up questions was like, what's the greatest gain that you've gotten from this technology, either personally or professionally? And for me, to answer or respond to Simba's point now, I thought I was a good manager until I started speaking to AI. And I started treating it like it was a junior employee where, maybe I thought that it was more capable than it was. But I realized that my ability to communicate my desired outcomes was what I was not very capable of doing. And, because an employee is likely to say yes, they understand, they're going to go off, they're going to give it their best attempt at answering, and hopefully it's like a few hours later you get the response or the feedback, but sometimes it's days and sometimes it's weeks, and then you don't get back what you were wanting back, and you need to ask yourself, well, did I communicate the wrong thing? Did they misunderstand? Did my requirement change in that timeline? But because AI, it really shortens the feedback loop for me, I can very quickly see if what I'm asking it and the task that I'm doing it, is it doing it? And it has taught me so much about how I delegate. And I'm like, dude, no wonder your employees are just quickly saying yes to things. It's like, you're confusing as hell. So, I think that there are going to be so many different ways that these technologies make us as individuals more productive. And the key one is defining success, right? So I guess that's my next question then is what has been some of the surprising benefits that you guys have gotten from this technology?
So I can share a little bit about that. Sorry, you can go next.
No, go ahead.
So I think the benefits that our team has found is the ability to prototype really quickly, as you mentioned. So we're able to actually let it generate code that we can quickly show business stakeholders. It can be throwaway code. I mean, right now we can just treat code as something that you just run and throw away, as before you actually spend time and effort. But because it's prototype phase, it's fine. You know that it's probably not going to go into production. So we're just going to show them just to convey what we're thinking, what the vision is, the art of the possible. So we find that super useful, and that's a surprising benefit. Before, software engineers were like, wow, we're spending, code is like gold, we have to, but now it's literally like a throwaway thing. We just write, it doesn't work, throw it away, and rewrite, and just keep iterating. And it iterates really, really fast. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I think on our side, what we've seen is a particular process in mind. We took out 2/3 of the actual manual work that a person would have to do to execute upon the customer task. What that actually meant is that something that would take 24 hours because it sits in a queue, it does this, that, and the third, and you need to go through 3 different screens. Someone puts information on a specific sheet for us. We take that on, run it through an RPA bot. RPA executes it across all the different screens. Bob's your uncle, after an hour you get a response, and that frees up time for that person to go and do something that's not that manual related, but actually adds value to the customer rather than spending time punching 1, 2, 3 on an Excel sheet. And I think that's where the power of the idea of, okay, so if you could do anything, what would it be? And why is that valuable to you? Because now we can actually say, oh, no, if we do this, we can save you this amount of hours. Now, what would you do with those hours? And then have those be utilized for the benefit of your organization.
For me, it's really changed the narrative from how you build to what you build. And we're spending more time now on the creative side of what we build. Because the how we build, we're getting a lot of support from the AI tools, Cursor and whatnot. And that now is a huge shift. Because now we're using our brain power for different things to solve different problems, not like the weeds. And the starting point is so long and so hard to get going. And again, you have this thing on paper, and how do you sort of get it into the hands of the customer? But now you're getting more creative. But it's also like leveling the playing field as well, because now everyone has access to this. So now what's your differentiator? You want to build a startup. So it's now changing that as well. So it's like also challenging us now to say, okay, should we just throw away this front end? To Harry's point, code is becoming throwaway. Build it out, deploy it. Oh, cool. They don't like that. Yeah, throw that away. It's fine. Build it again. And so it's really challenging us now, on the product side. But it's also the opportunity. It's exciting.
I think that poses a great follow-up question. For those in the room that do have decision-making power and budget, and I'm sure all of you want to be around and relevant in 5 years. Nobody plans for 5 years to go out of business. Where do businesses start to focus today? What becomes the key differentiators? How can they be in the best possible position to capitalize on the technology in 5 years from now?
So again, it relates to your product strategy strategy and your company strategy. So that hasn't gone away. And like I think that's a little bit of a mistake. Like I've in conversation, I see people like, yeah, okay, how do we leverage AI? Like, okay, for what purpose and for what reason and in what context? Oh, okay, cool. But what if it fails? It's probably going to fail the first time. That's the point. This is new stuff. You gotta experiment. And I think like for business leaders, you have to understand that. And then you have this whole POC thing. Like I'm like not a fan of POCs. Like you want to prove what concept. And then you have an output that's a report, and is a business leader supposed to make a decision based on this report? No, man. So I believe in like iterative, practical implementations that can add actual business value with the customer. And like, let's try to, we want that PDF report. Sure, I've heard about it, and we still do it. But yeah, you have to think on that line.
Okay, your key differentiators?
Yeah, so I think AI is something that you have to have a strategy about. I think a year or 2 years ago, we were advising startups, SMBs that you don't have to have an AI strategy. You just have to have a response when someone asks you, "What are you doing with AI?" But nowadays, I feel like AI strategy is becoming more and more important. So to keep yourself relevant in 5 years' time, you have to start thinking about how you can incorporate AI as part of your business. Every single business, I mean, online businesses, SaaS solutions, you can see everyone's got an AI strategy. Everyone's got an AI stance. Everyone's going to be like, I'm using AI. Even though they're not, they still say they're using AI, right? So have a AI strategy. Start thinking about that. How can you incorporate state of the art? Back to what I was saying, just be that person that's willing to adopt AI, bring it into organization. Start small. You don't have to overnight incorporate it to your core business.
Yeah, so I think if I were to add, and this again, my theme is always going to be the same. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And with that in mind, if you're trying to build a new house, right, and you happen to be living in your current house, but you're trying to think, okay, what is it that I would like this new house to look like? Is it really the worst thing if you burn the stove in your old house if you're trying to build a new one? Might not be, because it's a lesson learned that you can apply to this new house that you're trying to build. Now, I know large corporates and risk not necessarily the best friends, right? But allow yourself to be able to test things in your existing world that you can then say, okay, with that in mind now, we know and we've learned A, B, and C. And so to be able to scale that, here's where it can apply in the world that we're trying to go to. And really, I think it's that ability to say, let's fail fast, but fail forward. Like if it burns, can we not burn the stove again? Thank you very much.
Epic. So I was listening to quite an interesting podcast on Replit. They're one of the companies that are, let's call it, doing vibe coding. And they've just raised, I think it was like $300 million, quite a large round. And they were asked, whether they are going to be investing in foundational models versus, do they like the Lovables and the Bolts of the world? Do they just tap into OpenAI or Gemini or Claude or whatever, and they do vibe coding as basically a wrapper. And what was quite interesting from the CEO is he said that these models will go through cycles. During some periods, the fine-tuned data that you possess applied to an open source model that you've now adopted, you've run on your own machines, from an investment perspective, from a quality of data perspective, the output that you're going to be getting is going to be higher and more cost effective than plugging into some foundational model from somewhere else. But it's a crazy competitive world at the moment where these companies are investing more into the sector than humanity has ever invested in any sector during this time frame than ever before. And so, why he says it's cyclical is that he might have 6 months of a window where their own run models are better, and then they're going to need to run somebody else's models that they're fine-tuning, and then they'll collect more data, and they will then again cycle back to building their own models. And so, even for the companies that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, they're really needing to figure out when to build versus when to buy. And I think for a lot of people right now, it's kind of like let my competitors make the $100 million mistake first. We'll see what works, what doesn't work, and then if it works, we've got enough distribution advantage that we'll catch up and we'll implement. What are some of the examples now, even if completely just speculative, that you think, you know what, actually these are a waste of money. Other companies are going to get better at building these things. Don't worry about building them yourself. Focus on your core IP. Do you have any specific examples of what that might be?
Sure. I love this because this one keeps me up at night. Like a little bit. Because we constantly asking ourselves what to build now. Now, do we leverage the existing foundational models? Is the awareness company going to build a foundational model? No. Like how? At like what cost? The chief product officer at OpenAI said something quite interesting in a Lenny's podcast. If you guys don't know about Lenny's podcast, go find it. It's awesome. He was like, think about the AI that's existing today, like all of them, like right now. It is the worst AI that's ever going to exist. It's only getting better and better and better. So, like, leverage it. You want to build a business, leverage it to make your business better, and then find your niche. Like, what are you really good at? But that's also giving us a different opportunity. Maybe this is now an opportunity to take your inside passions and run with that. Because that's when you're going to find out when you are really good and what you're really good at. That's what I really believe. So, from our side, leverage what's out there. And then if you want to build a model, build a model. But understand where you're going to play. I think it's a hard one to accept a little bit. You're like, yeah, there's a bunch of smart people here. We're all smart people. We nerds and we want to build it out. But I mean, how much of an ego do you want to be and say, okay, I'm going to build what they built? I don't think you are going to at this point in time.
So buy versus build is always a conversation we have with our clients, because whenever they come to us, like, hey, I want the AI, I want this chatbot, I want that, then they always get into the conversation of like, hey, ChatGPT costs like $20. Why are you costing us like $5,000, right? So if you're building a wrapper application, so that's a plug and play. So you have the software and you just want to use OpenAI's APIs, right, to give you that chatbot feel. So that's buying, right? Then you have to work out your economy of scale. So that type of model doesn't really have a good economy of scale because it's linear, right? Because you're actually paying OpenAI however many calls. Whereas traditional software, a lot of investors, a lot of SaaS solutions, focus on the economy of scale, where your foundational infrastructure is flatline, but then your revenue goes up. But with this day and age, if you have a wrapper application, it goes up with it. So you don't get that margin that you think you have. Whereas if you build, you might do that, but your upfront investment is a lot higher because now you have to buy computers, you have to host it yourself, you have to fine-tune it. So there's a lot of pros and cons people have to consider when it's like buy versus build. Like, is it worth it? And I think South Africa, being a very application-driven economy, especially in the AI space, we don't really do a lot of research. Research is always done by Silicon Valley and those guys. So a lot of us actually just focus on building wrapper applications. So just think about that, and that's the pros and cons we normally ask them to think about.
Yeah, I mean, great points. The only thing maybe I'll throw into the bucket is, what's your unfair advantage? If you've got technical capability in a specific vertical that allows you to be able to build models, etc., then hey, go for it. If not, then the question becomes, if you're going to buy, what are you going to do with the capacity that you've saved off of the purchase to be able to make your moat even bigger? And I think that's the fundamental strategic thinking that needs to happen with artificial intelligence, which is to say, okay, every customer needs to buy, every customer needs to pay, every customer needs to enjoy the experience, or they even need to find out how about what I do. And where is it that you want to apply the technology to be able to look at the customer value chain and create your unique competitive advantage against your industry players?
I want to add to this, like the whole buy versus build. Like, we don't have to choose only one side.
You can do both.
Like, do both. Because then you create, like, AI is not just ChatGPT-like technology. Like, that's what's mainstream now, and it's amazing, it's phenomenal. But that's, from a business sense, like, thinking about how do we help an organization do both and leverage both, and that's now like our advantages. Like we can take some of that and take some of this and piece that together and then create something of value, direct value for the enterprise, for the businesses. So you don't always have to push yourself into a corner and say, okay, what do I do? I mean, Harry's point about the economies of scale is brilliant. And there's another economies of scale that we were chatting about, this revenue per employee. And that changes the dynamic now. So now startups can start to think differently about how they want to expand, and then the enterprise businesses can think differently about what they buy, what they build, who do they get to help them build, and who do they help them get to buy as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, proud. We're going to do one last question to the panel, and then we're going to hand over to you guys to ask some questions. This last one is meant to be a bit of a fun one. But for me, I am a little bit on the, let's call it the wilder side of what I believe is coming and coming relatively soon. And so I've begun building what I consider to be a data room that has as much possible information on me and the way in which I make decisions, my value system, my personality, how I would respond, my tone. And I fully believe that, as we give these systems more computational power, more data, and as we train them and incentivize them to focus on AI research that is going to make these models better and better, we will have emergent intelligence capable of doing things that you would never think an LLM is capable of doing. But it is going to become intelligent and potentially even conscious. And I do believe in a future where we have, every one of us has personal super intelligence, something that you can download and install in your home, where it's yours, it's your data, you're communicating with it. And just like you in your personal capacity can own a business, which is its own legal entity capable of hiring employees and trading, opening business, owning property, etc., I believe that AI systems will be able to do that. And so I am legitimately preparing, and I'm excited for the day where I get to feed my own open source model myself and build a digital clone of myself where I give it seed capital and I tell it to build businesses towards my passion and my interest, and I teach it to build its own economy, and hopefully I'm a benefactor of the wealth that it builds. If it goes Skynet, Terminator, I'm sorry in advance, everybody. But yeah, I think my last question is kind of meant to be a fun one. What sort of sci-fi future tech do you believe is coming that you're excited for?
So I think everyone will have a co-pilot. So personally, I'm also building very similar to what you just described. So over the past few years, I think 10 years, I'm into the second brain concept. So you build like a knowledge base where you store a lot of things. It's one of the benefits of owning your own data. You can now have your own tone, you mentioned, all that stuff. So that's something I'm experimenting with. But the actual fact that I've been ingesting into that knowledge base is with my own thoughts. So I'm hoping over the next 5 years, I can create a digital twin, because it will be someone that sounds like me. I'll be able to write emails, maybe even do calls. I'm not sure about voice. I haven't recorded myself, but maybe. So I think it is definitely possible, but you definitely need that personal data first. Yeah, and I think everyone's got that. Probably like your emails, how you write.
Everyone's Otter AI
Yeah.
notes, Fireflies, Google
So
Transcripts.
it's definitely coming.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. Yeah, I'm preparing for that day already. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I love this, and we have a lot of similarities. So I've had this idea in my head for like 10 years. So my name is a bit of a misnomer, like the spelling came out weird. There was a mistake. So it's a unique spelling. So I own Priyash.com.
Nice.
And so I have for years wanted to build my own website. Never did it. It's one of those things you push out to the side. And so a couple months back, I sat down one night and I opened personal PO. And I'm like, okay, let me finally build Priyash.com. And I'm a bit of a retro guy, so I made it all retro-y, like Mario and things like that. Built it out, started putting out articles and blogs and just putting stuff on there. And tone is important. So when I talk to ChatGPT or whatever, I'm like, write me an email or proposal, and then I'll give it some of my like bad grammar paragraphs, and I'll be like, no, just use my own tone, things like that. And then when I was preparing for this day, this panel, I was like, give me some divergent AI things that we can talk about to the crowd. It's not boring stuff. Then I started referencing Priyash.com. And I was like, I didn't ask you to do that, but you went in and found it. So like, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool now. It's like, has anyone used ChatGPT where it surprises you? It's like, wait, hold on, yeah, I didn't like ask you for that, but okay, it's kind of cool. It's a little scary. So I think like going forward, like in the 5 years time, it's gonna surprise us a lot, which is exciting. And for me, one of the terms that I love I'm also a data guy, so like I like to talk about data a lot. Like we're very data rich in the world now, but we quite insight poor. we haven't taken that data further. And I think as time goes by, it's really going to surprise us as to what is that deeper level of insight that's just sitting there now, the potential, but it's not there yet. We still have to graft through it. We still have to struggle. We still have to get to that unique insight that's going to change our lives and change the narrative and change the business and like give us new avenues in there. So that's what I'm quite excited about. Whether it's called super intelligence or whatever, I think the fundamental of it is it's going to really take us further as humanity from an insight perspective. It's going to surprise us.
Good.
Yeah, so I think mine is not as cool and interesting and sci-fi as yours. Mine is almost in real life when I look at humanity. What I see as our differentiator across most organisms is that we can learn. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, you've got a technology or capability that can learn and give you PhD level analysis on everything. The question then becomes, and this is what's been on my mind, so what should you learn? What should I spend my time on that would be valuable in a world where knowledge has become so democratized? And I don't know what model will be able to do that, but I'm like, that is a very interesting world to be able to live in because your limitations are no longer limitations because you don't have to read one book at a time. But for me, the innovator's dilemma is what connection is worth making. And I think that is where I would love to spend a little bit more time playing with this technology. Say, okay, so we can do it here, we can do it there, but what's actually worth doing for the world at large?
Sick. Well, let's give our panel a round of applause. And then Mr. Joel over there has a mic, so feel free to ask questions. You can either address them just generally to the crowd, or if they are directed to a person, then just direct them at the speaker.
Hi guys, thank you so much. That was really, really cool. Coming back to South Africa, looked at your LinkedIn really quickly, and we were all about, maybe looking at the panel. What would you guys, if you had all the money, all the budget, government's we weren't corrupt, we weren't broken, what would you put in place? We don't want to fix potholes right now. I think we got a lot more fundamental wrong. What would you put in place? Maybe just one idea, not sci-fi, maybe something that's in your corporations to fix, to give back to the communities from an AI perspective, from a technology perspective. I'm very old. I believe Skynet is coming, and everyone's vaping. They're getting prepared. So I just want to see that humanity actually feeds back and gets back from this, because a lot of people are making a lot of money, but it kind of circulates in the same economy. How would we change that? How would we, if you watch the Day of the Jackal, the guy who's going to circulate where all the money comes from, how can we stop the corruption? Just something, maybe the panel, one or two. How can we fix what's broken?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start because I spent many years working in the semi-public sector, doing as I mentioned, anti-wildlife poaching and sort of disaster management and like ESCOMs and Transnets, and like there's deep, deep problems in there. And there's a lot of people trying to solve these really, really deep problems, and they're super complex. They're multi-organizational, they're cross-organizational, there's multiple layers around that. And when I was working in that space, like technology always comes up, but it's like the side thing. It's always the side thing. I think think AI can help us change that narrative, but it needs like will. It needs people to say, okay, let's stop treating this thing as the side thing. Let's like have, what's the country's AI strategy to solve deep societal problems? That has to come from the top, or there needs to come from a mixture of government and private sector coming together to start to solve that. Now, I would love to see that happen now, because those problems can be solved or start to be, you can start to think about how you're going to solve them and implement solutions on the ground now, today. That can happen today. We don't need that super intelligence to start doing those things today, and I would love to see that happen.
So if I have infinite money, I would invest in education, so also public sector, provided there's no corruption. Because I think education is like super important to uplift the entire society. Because a lot of times people ask us from an ethical perspective, is AI going to take our jobs? But if everyone, have a better education, then you don't have to worry too much about AI taking your jobs, right? Because you have your own intelligence, and that's through a lot of problem solving, learning, and all these things need to be taught to people. Yeah.
So OpenAI has just done a partnership with Saudi Arabia where the government is paying for every single citizen to get a premium subscription to OpenAI, so that that is no longer an excuse to why somebody can or can't learn. Where more do we need that than in Africa? But I would say that one of the big differentiators here is how many of our languages go undocumented and unsupported for our people. But in actual reality, one of the things that LLMs are good at is pattern recognition. And so should we apply more resources, more computation towards understanding the African language, then we can service people in their own language. And once you give them a tool like personal intelligence, we don't need to change people's lives. People are already wanting to change their own life. We just need to give them the tools to do that.
Cool. We have another question, yeah?
Hey guys. So you sparked a question actually on our side. We just had a talk at our company about dark data and the fact that there's a lot of data just sitting there not being used. And then at some point there'll be basically the data apocalypse where we have more data and we're using more computational power than we actually have the ability to generate power. But then on the flip side, you said you have to have good data for this to actually work. So we obviously can't ignore that this is coming. We need to be putting work into it, otherwise it's going to be left behind. And then we also know anything, it needs to be good data in for good data out. So yeah, I guess, do you have any suggestions on how a company can responsibly sort out their data in a way that it's actually useful while not causing too many issues as well?
Sure. Data cleanup is like this. Like, who here gets joy from data cleanup?
Oh yeah, talk dirty to me.
I mean, your AI strategy, we talked about that. You need a data strategy as well, like for real, and like you need to understand the structure and the context, where it's gonna live, what's the right tools, what's the right databases. This is not a trivial problem, but it's a fundamental one if you're gonna use it. I really like your terminology, data apocalypse. I might steal that.
Silicon Valley says data given.
Data given. Wow. I had this thought for a while since ChatGPT came out. People were like talking about the ethics of it and what is the Skynet and the evil AIs and stuff like that. And the dark data, yeah. So who's training like AI models using like criminal data, and how do they become better criminals and stuff like that? I'm sure people are doing this, right? But my whole take on it is, as long as there's a whole bunch of people doing good with the technology and expanding it, that needs to sort of surpass all the people that want to do bad with it. I think the same principle applies within a business organization. Because a lot of people are stuck. They're like, yeah, I'm fine with this spreadsheet type of structure, and I'll just use it and I'll put it in ChatGPT and look, it works. But it doesn't really work, does it? You kind of becoming efficient at doing something poorly in there. So you gotta separate the data strategy, but start really small. So the advantage now is to take a little subset and make that really amazing and then scale it up. Those basic principles have not changed in that way. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, so I think data cleaning is a big topic because 80% or even more than that of our data scientists' time is cleaning data. But in terms of dark data, I think data that you don't know about is useless data. You don't even care about it. So I think focus on the data that you know first. Leave the dark data alone. Just don't worry about it. Because I think a lot of organizations are like data hoarders. They like to hold data because they'll be like, oh, in case. Because data is the new oil. In case, I don't know, in the future, maybe I'll use it, but you're gonna forget about it 10 years down the line, and I was just sitting there not doing anything. Just leave it alone.
Absolutely. I think on the other side, again, and not the organizations that hoard data, but the data you have is actually quite valuable. I mean, they're making AI replications of themselves, which is data that they uniquely have. And so what data do you have that's unique to your organization that allows you to be able to do something with it? And this is that whole moat idea, okay? There's something uniquely that the data that you have that can make you unique to whatever outcome you're trying to fulfill. And I think it's that, what do you do with what's in your hands right now? And how do you make that better for wherever the future you're trying to go to is? The dark data, unless you're playing in the dark world, really doesn't matter.
Cool. Other question this side?
Hi, Taz from Recommend. Doing all the panelists hard times before, but we're going to do it again. As an executive, I totally believe in what you guys said, totally happening probably earlier than you all think. I have my own voice recording, AFX voice and all that stuff. So it's coming. But at $20 is your minimum price, but you probably need a $100 package or more if you're really using it. And now you got 10 staff times 4 types of products. You easily get to 100,000 of AI budget expenditure. That's on a team of like maybe 20 people. And it's all useful and all beneficial, and that's all true. But like, how do you manage that? I have the pain of having to tell people what people get what licenses because I can't afford everyone to get all of the 7 licenses, and I have to justify to the board that I'm spending 150,000 hypothetically on AI services. And I'm sure people don't make the revenue to profitability to spend 100,000 on AI services is not that easy to answer.
I can take a swing at that. I mean, every business is going to be different, so it's difficult to give a one-size-fits-all approach, but we've all been through the struggles of fighting with our CFO, and they're doing the right job of stopping us from spending unnecessarily, but CFO is trying to manage spend, and you're trying to think about value creation, so they're very different sides of the coin. The way that I like to quantify it is, without AI, what would my salary bill be to accomplish what I need to accomplish? With AI and employees, and here's where I hate to say it, but it's true. Do I need to hire 5 more engineers to build what I need to build, or can I take the cost of 5 engineers and make the 10 engineers that I have today super engineers? And I think that the productivity gains that we're going to get per employee very quickly are going to, the cost that we're spending on the support system of our employees is going to be a bigger cost than their entire salary. I'm not thinking of like somebody that's going to be spending 10,000 Rand a month on their subscriptions. I'm thinking of an employee that's like a 50,000 to 100,000 Rand a month salary, but is consuming 150 to 500,000 Rand a month of computation. But then they need to be creating millions a month of value. And once you get those economics right, it's how do you produce more of those employees?
So I think that ROI conversation is always interesting because obviously sitting on the executive level, you need to be making rands and cents decisions. But I think what's often left out of the technology AI conversation is the human element. So what do I mean by that? First things first, ChatGPT can't do everything, right? And you still need some employees. If you're talking LLMs, APIs, RPA, whatever suite, machine learning, you still need some employees, right? so what is it that exists in their institutional knowledge that you can benefit from by creating more capacity? So it becomes no longer a $150,000 saving question. It's, okay, if we were to invest in this way, what new value can we unlock and what do we do with that? Because if you're able to create more value higher than the tune of 150,000, yes, maybe it's over a long-term period, then the 150,000 conversation becomes negligible. The question is, how do you package that in a way that it makes sense for your organization?
We have time for 2 more questions.
Well, hi everyone. So I'm Onkgopotse Kumalo. I'm the founder of Amari Health. And so the conversation around AI is very interesting for us because we are in the healthcare business and the business of wellness. And my question is for you, Harry. You touched on the fact that you service healthcare and fintech kind of clients. And it's all fair and well, very excited about AI and leveraging it to optimize provider productivity and all those things. But it's all fair and well to talk about houses burning down and Terminator stuff and all that stuff and experimentation, which is crucial. I love that. But when it comes to being in the business of making decisions that can literally be the difference between life and death, and people's data and how you use that data being the difference between life and death, how do you then bridge that gap between pace of innovation and implementing guardrails without kind of stifling your forward momentum? The Adam Rain case around ChatGPT and how now OpenAI is starting to think about guardrails around you don't want your ChatGPT to become a suicide notes coach. What are some of the things that you do or advise your healthcare clients on differently, or clients who are dealing with sensitive data, to bridge that gap between pace of innovation but also guardrails to make sure that you're ethically innovating?
Yeah. So with the healthcare clients in health tech specifically, we normally look at how they adopt AI from 2 aspects. So either back office or front office. So if it's back office, we talk about productivity, we're talking about optimization. When it's front office, we're putting it in front of like your customers, like actual consumers. So we've got one startup that we're working with. They're called FinFlow. So basically, they're a woman health tech. They're like a female tech. So what they do is you analyze lab reports. So females, they go and get their blood test, they get lab results, but it's full of jargon. They don't know what it's talking about. So they want a chatbot that's able to analyze that lab results based on the personal information of the woman and give them advice on how do you actually this is your hormone level of cortisol is high, maybe you should do more exercises, that type of thing. So you see guardrail becomes super important because we have to make sure that the chatbot is providing accurate information based on the lab results. We all know LLMs and ChatGPT, they love to hallucinate, right? If you prompt it the right way, you can let it answer random things. So what we normally do is we set up an evaluation set. So we ask the healthcare provider, the employee in this case, our customer, what are the dangerous questions and what should the AI respond to? And then we tweak the AI, we tweak the LLM, we swap different models to see which one will have the most accurate response. We use knowledge bases, we set up guardrails. So these are called guard agents. So basically an LLM that protects and evaluates the response. So there are these techniques that you can use for these front office type of application. Back office, the same example is if you read the lab results and it's inaccurate, that means your front office bot is going to give inaccurate answers. So how do you prevent that? Then you have to use different techniques, not just rely on LLMs, use other OCR methods to supplement the LLM's response. So there are these techniques that we put in place, and how do you secure data and all that stuff. So it is super important, and we also make sure that if you operate in regions that care about HIPAA, we make sure that it's also whatever cloud provider you have, they are also compliant, etc. So you have to think about all these things, and then that's what we do.
Cool. We have time for one last question, but the panelists will be after the session.
Hi Harry, maybe a disclaimer before I start. It looks like a healthcare consultation now already. So myself as well in the healthcare space, a great feedback there, Daniel, about what Saudi Arabia is doing in terms of making, this AI accessible. Quite interestingly, in South Africa, we find that adoption is quite low. We have all these amazing innovations coming through from wonderful innovations such as us as Clinch. We're all about patient support. This is the work that we do. But we find that in South Africa, quite uniquely, the adoption of all these amazing innovation is quite low. And with the pace of innovation, what we're bringing out and the pipeline and all of the amazing innovation that we're bringing out, how would you perhaps suggest or recommend is the best way in which we can make the solutions to be quite adoptable and appropriate for the context which is and the nuances within this environment which is South Africa, right? As we know, we're not solving Silicon Valley problems, we're solving South African problems. And if you look at the health tech space or the healthcare space in particular, the primary healthcare environment to be specific, we're looking really at low adoption, poor technology adoption. A lot of people don't have access to even internet or smartphones. How do we make this type of technology available to such individuals? I myself am more into patient support, making sure that we simplify complex medical conversations or jargons and dialogue, and we simplify that quite similar to the innovation that you've spoken about. How do you recommend that we make that sort of available to the everyday South African or the everyday user?
Yeah, so unfortunately, LLMs are trained on a corpus of data that is not South Africa specific. And most of the data that is trained on is more US based, which doesn't understand South African context or even African context. So another example is another like health tech startup that we helped with. It's actually on women's sexual health. So basically what happens is women who have who are underprivileged, they don't really understand, they can't go to doctors. This startup was to provide some sort of hotline for the females who can call in and ask questions about what they're experiencing. So one example would be like, I haven't experienced my period in 2 months, what should I do? So the context over here is very important because the AI in this case is an agent. It's an AI agent, a support agent that you call and you actually speak to the agent. You need to make sure that it needs to answer not insensitive, so answer with sensitive things. So, if people ask you questions like, am I bewitched? You can't just be like, no, that is fake. You have to make sure that it is like sensitive. And we do a lot of guardrails to make sure. Again, we ask the provider like a set of dangerous questions and what should the AI actually answer, and then kind of like box it in. The guardrail all it does is just box it in because it goes out and looks for WebMD articles that's trained on WebMD, but it's not really applicable in the South African context, especially for people who are underprivileged and they don't have that level of education. You can't, and especially medication in South Africa is also named differently to the US things, and they give you suggestions of this medicine that doesn't even make sense. Actually, that one we can't actually provide or give them like medical advice in that sense. So that's one example, another guardrail that we put in place. So you have to just put in these guardrails, but you have to speak with the subject matter experts, in this case, the women's sexual health provider, to make sure that they provide you with the necessary information, because we're not SMEs, we don't know. They know. They have to give us the information so that we can box the AI in and not to do that just because the AI isn't trained with the South African context, unfortunately.
I mean, this is actually where I have a bit of a contrarian opinion on this, because I need to not be insensitive to humans, right? Because it's important to look after each other. But most of these companies, even if we take OpenAI as an example, they started as a non-profit, and then as soon as they realized how much money they could make, they went for a for-profit company. And so if there's a particular segment of the market that doesn't make economic sense to support or go after, they will be the last that these technologies end up supporting and helping. And so I personally believe in giving humanity more free choice as opposed to removing the technology from them. I completely get the risks to OpenAI and giving somebody bad medical advice, suicide note, ends up killing themselves. Now there's a legal battle. But if we get to the point where we recognize that these technologies can help the majority of cases while making sure people understand that it's still their responsibility to understand these technologies hallucinate. These technologies aren't going to give you fully accurate. You should still consult a lawyer or a doctor, etc. To me, does it make more sense to deny somebody completely the option of using this technology because of that one random case that could go very wrong? Like, yeah, clearly I would personally rather give it to humanity and let people learn and experiment, and we will adopt as we need to, but I'm kind of pro-adoption acceleration.
Can I just add, because that was actually going to be my answer, since they took education, healthcare is the space I would look at. The only fundamental thing to consider within your healthcare play is you need to understand how the healthcare ecosystem works completely. So are you trying to go to the client or are you trying to go to the provider? Because that is a world of difference in terms of how you provide your solution. If you're going to the provider, then you need to go and have a rands and cents conversation. Listen, if I do A, B, and C, that could mean reduced patients coming into your space, or it could increase your capacity to be able to take care of A, B, and C cases. That's the language you have to be speaking in that context. In the direct-to-consumer context, you need to be saying, okay, what is the ailment that we're going to be looking at? And what is the communication, to Harry's point, that you need to have targeted to that specific individual who's experiencing the healthcare challenge? And so I think it's that strategic intent, being clear about, am I trying to go and help all the healthcare providers? Am I trying to go help the hospitals? Am I trying to help the individual? Who am I trying to help? And with that then, what is the solution that makes sense for them? Because only when something makes sense to you as a client will you adopt it. Adoption issues tend to happen because you don't build with the client or with the client in mind. It's easier to adopt something that I can say, ooh, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into that, we gotta make this work, rather than someone coming and doing a grand presentation and it's like, okay, cool tech, but what's the point?